You buy the $78 shoes before your first week at the better job. Not because you love the shoes, because your old pair squeaks in the hallway. And for some reason, that squeak feels like a confession. It says you are new here. It says you are trying. It says you are not quite as stable as everyone else looks. So you buy the shoes, cut the tag off, and tell yourself it is practical. And maybe it is. The shoes are not ridiculous. They are not a luxury car. They are not a watch you cannot pronounce. They are ordinary shoes. But that is what makes the purchase so dangerous. The most expensive status symbols are not always loud. Sometimes the expensive thing is the normal thing you feel you have to buy before anyone sees the truth. The shoes work. Nobody looks down. Nobody asks if you are okay. You walk into the office and feel a little more invisible, which is another way of saying you feel safe. That is the first trap. Looking successful works. People respect you faster, they question you less, they assume you are handling things. They invite you to lunch without checking the price first. They send the group trip link. They say, "You can afford it now." They do not mean harm. They are reading the signals you paid to send. But after a while, the signal becomes a subscription. The first payment buys relief. The second payment maintains relief. The third payment defends the version of you that everyone has already accepted. And suddenly the problem is no longer the shoes. The problem is that your life has hired you to keep looking like your life is working. That hidden cost has a name: the visibility tax. It is the money you spend so your struggle does not become visible. It is the dinner you say yes to because saying no would require a story. It is the newer phone because the cracked one makes you feel exposed in the meeting. It is the car payment that began as reliability and slowly became identity. It is the apartment that photographs well but leaves your bank account quiet at the end of the month. People often talk about lifestyle inflation like it is a simple failure of discipline. You earn more, so you spend more. But that explanation misses the emotional engine. Much of lifestyle inflation is not pleasure, it is defense. You are defending the version of yourself that finally stopped being questioned. This is why just spend less can sound so shallow from the inside. Spend less on what? The haircut that makes you look employable? The car that gets you to work without making your manager wonder? The wedding gift that keeps a friendship from turning awkward? The shirt that makes you feel like you belong in the room where your income is supposed to grow? None of those things are evil. Many are rational. Some genuinely open doors. The problem is what happens when every visible choice becomes a vote for who you are supposed to be now. At work, money is never just money. It becomes a costume. You do not only bring skills into the room. You bring shoes, a bag, a phone, a car key, a lunch order, a neighborhood, a background. People invent from the objects around you. In theory, none of this should matter. In real life, people are constantly deciding whether you look prepared, serious, promoted, reliable, polished, ambitious, and safe to trust. So you upgrade the outside before the inside has caught up. You tell yourself it is temporary. When the paycheck gets bigger, it will all even out. But the outside has a memory. Once people see you as the person with the better shoes, better phone, better apartment, or better car, it becomes harder to admit that the inside is still catching up. A cheap lunch becomes a signal. Saying no becomes a signal. Wearing the same thing too often becomes a signal. Not joining drinks becomes a signal. You are no longer only paying for objects. You are paying to avoid interpretation. Then the pressure becomes social. A friend chooses the restaurant. It is not outrageous, just more expensive than you would have chosen alone. The bill lands at $96 after tax and tip. You smile because everyone else is smiling. You tap your card and tell yourself this is what normal adults do. Nobody forced you. Nobody humiliated you. That is what makes it hard to name. The pressure is polite. It comes as birthdays, weddings, group trips, new baby gifts, holiday dinners, weekend plans, work drinks, and we should celebrate. A social life becomes a series of small tests where the correct answer is rarely written down. If you say yes, you pay. If you say no, you explain. If you explain too often, you become the person everyone has to plan around, so you buy your way out of being complicated. That is audience debt. It is not owed to a bank. It is owed to the people who watched you become the person you claimed to be. Every time you look more successful, the audience updates its expectations. And every expectation becomes one more place where honesty feels expensive. This is why looking successful can make you poor even when your income is rising. The money does not only buy things, it buys silence. It buys fewer questions. It buys the ability to walk into a room without performing an explanation. Then the upgrade becomes monthly. At first, the upgrade is a decision. Then it becomes a payment. A newer car, a better apartment, a cleaner gym, a phone plan, a few subscriptions, a wardrobe that needs maintenance, a neighborhood where everything around you quietly assumes you have more room than you do. The purchase stops being a purchase. It becomes rent on an identity. And rent is the right word, because the cost repeats whether the feeling is still there or not. The first week, the upgrade feels like proof. The third month, it feels normal. The ninth month, it may feel like nothing at all, but the payment still arrives with the confidence of something permanent. That is how a temporary emotion becomes a fixed cost. This is where small payments become dangerous. A total price can scare you, but a monthly price can sound reasonable. $42 here, $29 there, 4 payments instead of 1. A little more for the version with better reviews. A little more because you are tired of buying the cheap thing twice. Again, not all of this is foolish. Sometimes the better option really is better. Sometimes reliability is worth paying for. But the trap is that the future version of you becomes crowded with promises made by the current version of you. Your next paycheck already has a guest list before it arrives, and the guest list is full of old signals. The Federal Reserve's household survey keeps showing the same uncomfortable truth. Many adults have less emergency room than their outside life might suggest. That matters because visible success can hide a very thin margin. From the outside, a person can look upgraded. From the inside, one unexpected bill can still erase the month. Looking successful does not mean you have margin. Sometimes it means you spent the margin to look successful. There is another layer that people rarely say out loud. Family. The first time you look like you are doing better, people relax around you. That part can feel good. A parent worries less. A sibling assumes you are okay. A cousin treats you like you escaped. Someone says they are proud of you, and for a moment the purchase feels larger than the purchase. It feels like evidence, but evidence creates claims. Not always harsh claims. Often soft ones. Pick up the bill this time. Send a little help. Buy the better gift. Fly home for the event. Do not act like you cannot afford it. You are the one doing well now. Again, nobody has to be cruel for this to become expensive. Most people are not trying to trap you. They are simply responding to the version of your life that became visible. This is why some people hide progress. They do not announce the raise, they keep the older car. They avoid naming the exact job title. They let people underestimate them, not because they are secretive by nature, but because they have learned that visible improvement invites new expectations. The moment your money becomes part of other people's emotional comfort, it stops being only your money. It becomes public evidence, and public evidence is hard to take back. This is also why downgrading can feel harder than never upgrading. If you never bought the nicer car, nobody asks why you sold it. If you never moved to the better apartment, nobody asks what happened. If you never became the person who always pays, nobody wonders why you stopped. The first visible upgrade gets applause, the reversal gets questions. So people keep paying, not because the object still brings joy, but because the alternative would require explaining that the image got ahead of the reality. That is when success becomes a room with no private exit. Now split one raise into 2 lives. In both lives, the person gets an extra $500 a month. In the first life, the raise stays boring. The car does not change. The phone stays cracked for another month. Lunch stays packed more often than bought. Nobody at work knows the raise happened. Friends do not notice anything. Family does not update their expectations. The money moves quietly into a buffer. This version of the raise is emotionally unsatisfying. There's no reveal, no congratulations, no proof. The person looks almost exactly the same. But after 6 months, something has changed. A car repair is annoying, not devastating. A job problem is scary, not trapping. A late reimbursement is irritating, not humiliating. The person has bought something invisible. Room. In the second life, the raise becomes visible. Not all at once. Just a better car because the old one was embarrassing. A nicer place because the old apartment felt like a chapter that should have ended. More dinners because saying no after a raise feels strange. A better phone because the camera is part of work now. A few payments that seem small enough to ignore. For the first month, this life feels better. It looks like progress. It feels like finally becoming the person all that work was supposed to produce. But after 6 months, the raise is gone before it arrives. The person does not feel richer. They feel upgraded and trapped. They cannot easily move backward because moving backward is public. Selling the car would tell a story. Moving apartments would tell a story. Skipping dinners would tell a story. Keeping the cracked phone would have been private, but downgrading from the new one becomes visible. That is why the most dangerous upgrade is not the one you cannot afford today. It is the one you can barely afford forever. Money is not only for buying things. Money buys the right to wait, refuse, repair slowly, leave quietly, and be misunderstood without panic. When too much money is tied to looking successful, you lose those rights. You stay longer at a job that is draining you because the car payment does not care how your manager speaks to you. You accept worse terms because rent is due. You say yes to a client you dislike because your lifestyle has less patience than your values. You keep smiling at dinners because the version of you at the table cannot afford to become complicated. This is the hidden tragedy of the visibility tax. It does not only take cash, it takes exits. And exits are what make money feel like freedom. People with real margin often look strangely unimpressive for exactly this reason. They are not always trying to prove the number. They may drive the older car, wear the same jacket, keep the same phone until it actually fails, live below what people assume they could afford. Not because they hate comfort, because they understand something quiet. The money nobody sees can do jobs that visible money cannot do. Invisible money can absorb a bad month. Invisible money can keep a mistake private. Invisible money can let you negotiate. Invisible money can let you rest before the next decision. Visible money gets applause. Invisible money gives you exits. This is the difference between looking rich and being less trapped. Looking rich needs an audience. Being less trapped works even when nobody claps. That is also why this topic is so emotionally uncomfortable. Nobody wants to admit that part of their budget is not for themselves. It is for witnesses. It is for the friend who asks where you live, the coworker who notices your car, the cousin who thinks you are doing better now, the parent who relaxes when you look stable, the stranger whose opinion should not matter but somehow does when you are already tired. We do not only buy things, we buy fewer explanations, and sometimes fewer explanations are worth something. The point is not to become ashamed of wanting dignity. The point is to notice when dignity has been replaced by performance. Dignity says, I am allowed to be here. Performance says, I must keep proving I deserve to be here. One is grounding, the other sends invoices. So the next time you feel the pull to upgrade, the useful question is not, is this stupid? That question is too harsh, and it usually makes people defensive. A better question is, what job am I hiring this purchase to do? Is it solving a real problem? Is it buying reliability? Is it making daily life easier? Or is it protecting me from being seen too clearly? Because those are very different purchases. The shoes at the beginning were not the villain. Maybe you needed them. Maybe they helped you walk into the building with your shoulders lower and your voice steadier. That matters. Money is allowed to buy dignity. But if the shoes require the lunch, and the lunch requires the phone, and the phone requires the car, and the car requires the apartment, and the apartment requires staying in a life you can no longer question, then the first purchase was not a purchase. It was a door. And the door led into a version of yourself that charges monthly. The real goal is not to look unsuccessful. It is not to reject every nice thing. It is not to perform poverty as proof of wisdom. The goal is to stop letting every object become a spokesperson for your worth. Because the most expensive version of you is not the version that buys one nice thing. It is the version that needs every nice thing to keep explaining that you are okay. At the end of the week, the shoes are still by the door. They are clean. They did their job. But now there is a choice. You can let them be shoes, or you can let them become the beginning of a story you have to keep funding. Looking successful can open doors, but if you are not careful, it also hands you a bill for staying visible. And the bill does not say status on it. It says car payment, it says dinner, it says upgrade, it says just this once, it says you can afford it now. But sometimes the most powerful financial move is letting people be slightly wrong about you. Because every dollar that does not have to impress someone is still available to protect you.